The U.S. state of California recently approved a new state law that bars colleges from using legacy or donor preferences to decide which students to admit. California now becomes the fifth state to ban legacy admissions and just the second after the state of Maryland to apply that ban to private colleges. Okay, time for a deeper dive into these changes in college admissions in the U.S. Joining us now, Anthony Chan, former chief economist at J.P. Morgan Chase. Anthony, always good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Well, glad to be here.
Okay, let's kind of take a holistic look at this first. What immediate changes do you think the state of California universities are going to be making right now in response to this new state law banning legacy admissions and big donor preferences at private colleges, state colleges? Now, supporters of this measure have been blunt, believing the old measure gives unfair benefit to rich white kids.
Well, Sean, every time you have a system in place, it ends up giving some preference to some group and running the risk of discrimination. When we had racial quotas, people argued that it would give an advantage to minority students, and that would be to the detriment of non-minority students. Now, they're going to move in the direction of eliminating that, but they're also now going to move in the direction of eliminating the legacy or the donor-based kids. And so that in itself will also kind of remove another type of preferential treatment. But Sean, you have to keep in mind, what is the purpose of doing any of this stuff, whether it's racial quotas or things like that? The initial benefit was to reduce income inequality. That's why you had some sort of racial quotas.
Right.
Now that doesn't take place, you say, well, let's get rid of the legacy. Well, what does that do? Remember, the people that are rich donors or well-off donors, they're less likely to be minority students. So in some sense, that is going to improve and reduce inequality to some extent, because it means it opens up seats for other students that are not just there because they have parents that were able to contribute, but based on their ability to be there.
Yeah, I think that that's a pretty good breakdown of it all. And for people outside the U.S., basically what it's meant to do is give the affirmative action measures, students who normally wouldn't have the chance to go to very expensive private schools, a chance to get in there, and also kind of benefit students overall by expanding the college experience, by having them rub shoulders with people maybe they may not meet every day. But let's talk about this ban a little bit more. Do you think that it will have meaningful, will it improve the access for underrepresented students? And to go back to what you were talking about, there's also this measure about the U.S. Supreme Court acting a couple of years ago, doing away with affirmative action. So it's kind of a tit-for-tat thing.
Well, I think it is a step in the direction of moving it towards equality. It obviously is not going back to the way it was, where you actually had preferential, some spaces reserved for disadvantaged or minority students. But what it does is it removes that preferential hiring. If you have a minority student that is better qualified than a student that comes from a legacy family or a donor family, then it gives them a better chance. So it's moving the pendulum slightly in that direction, not entirely the way it was, but certainly a step in the right direction, because after all, what are we trying to strive for here? We know that a society that has massive income inequality does not function well, does not have good efficiency. And so this is a step in the direction of a little bit more equality. So I think it's a step in the right direction, but does it go far enough? Probably not.
Okay. Big donors are quite often wealthy, powerful people who are used to seeing people get something for their money. Do you think this measure is going to have a chilling effect on donations to universities and colleges? Obviously, they're worried about that.
Well, there's no question that it will, because if you were giving donations thinking that you'll be able to get your family members in, and now all of a sudden those donations have no impact. And again, it depends on whether or not this new law is enforced strictly or not, or whether it's going to go and be phased in. But if it is enforced in a strict fashion, it will reduce to some extent donations. And you can make the argument that if you do that, the university has less money, therefore has even less money to give out in financial aid. So it's not a real simple solution. There's certainly a lot of different side effects, secondary effects, and some would call them unintended effects that could result from this change in policy.
You know, and there are some in higher education saying, okay, do away with legacy admission. But in doing so, you're telling colleges and universities who they can or cannot admit. And there's an argument that this new measure will not help boost the number of minority and low-income students anyhow.
Yes, that argument is made, and there are some people in the Supreme Court that don't like the fact that you're going to do this. They say it's against the First Amendment. So I expect this new trend at some point to be challenged in the Supreme Court.
Interesting, but that obviously will take some time. Okay, I believe California is now the 5th state to institute this measure, this change in policy. We know Maryland is the only other state that this also spreads not only to public institutions that get public money, tax money, but to private institutions. The big question, do you think other states are going to follow, or do they not want to mess with, risk losing this money that comes in that benefits their endowment?
Well, I think that more states will probably be pressured into moving in that direction. So I would not be surprised if we see some movement. And then you make the argument that these are private colleges, and why should you actually tell them what to do? But Sean, more and more of these private colleges are receiving federal funding.
Yeah.
And so the argument is, should you have federal funding going into these universities that are showing some preferential treatment towards their donors and not really practicing real equality? So you can make good arguments on both sides, and I don't think it's black or white. There are good arguments on both sides, but I think that there are strong enough arguments against this legacy and donor argument of as a basis for admission, even though it's going to be disappointing because these universities had this policy for many years, and these donors were giving money for many years under the expectation that it would pay off, and now you basically pull the rug out of from under their feet. So you could argue that's unfair, that maybe this should actually happen in a piecemeal fashion because many people were already paying into the system and helping the university for many, many years. And some of that money can go into financial aid that can help minorities. So there are good arguments on both sides. But overall, when I look at this picture, I think it's a step in the right direction.
I can hear the phones in the Alumni Affairs office ringing right now, Anthony. Always a pleasure, my friend. No matter what topic, you always knock it out of the park. Thanks so much.
Thank you.